you ever wondered what truly lies in the recesses of your brain, and what would happen if someone took the worst parts of you and used that to create a new human being? The series Greylock tackles this very bizarre hypothetical and turns it into a grim reality. A reality where people are being killed by an unknown threat. A threat that is killing humanity in extremely disturbing ways. Hey everyone, it's Wildman. So in today's video I wanted to share with you guys a fairly unknown series called Greylock. So there are a ton of disturbing things that happen in this series, so viewer discretion is highly advised. And I'm pretty surprised that the series doesn't already have a ton of traction already, considering how well it's done. But before we begin, please don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and comment bruh. As always, that helps us out. And if you're feeling extra awesome today, check out my Instagram, it's super cool. Hey guys, real quick, I did want to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is Fume. Cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habits. And we're not talking about some crazy get out trance to get you to stop. Help me! We're talking about our sponsor Fume, and they look at the problem in a very different way. Not everything in a bad habit is so wrong, so instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from the habit? Fume is an innovative award-nominated device that does just that. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air, and instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all natural delicious flavors. You get it, instead of bad, Fume is good. It's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habits very easy. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, which gives your fingers a lot to do, which is very helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habits. And at first I wasn't really sure how I felt about the product, so I asked Fume to send one over before I did a sponsor for them, and I was very pleasantly surprised at how nice the flavored air was. Stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun. Fume has served over 100,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. Join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com/wowman or scan the QR code and use code WOWMAN to get 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com and use code WOWMAN to save an additional 10% off on your order today.
Please enter your clearance credentials.
Within this tape, we're introduced to what seems to be someone breaking into the security systems of an unknown building. Taking a look around, we can see some workstations with chunky computers that, we used to use back in the day. At first, they're unable to get in because they don't have the right credentials. So to work around that, they disengage the emergency system shutdown protocols.
Clearance credential requirement overridden. Administrator privileges granted.
And pretty soon we realize they're breaking into a company called Simiodin.usa, which we'll start to learn a little bit more about as we start to dive deeper into these tapes. But for now, it's just this company that they're breaking into. The person is trying to get the archival storage from the database, and once the data is fully extracted, the tape just cuts out, which directly bleeds into this next tape called To the Mountain, which starts off with this person randomly just driving in the middle of the night. And while they're driving, we can even hear a preacher on the radio delivering a sermon, which is pretty creepy on its own.
Guilty of tempting the devil to tempt us. We are not to enter the thicket in search of the lion. We may pay dear.
And one quote that really stuck out to me is when the preacher says this. He says, "Jesus, to pray, do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one," which I did find pretty interesting because in the original prayer, it is to deliver us from evil, not the evil one. So there is definitely some foreshadowing here to some evil that we have yet to encounter, but we'll see later in the series, so be prepared. The person driving stops the car at this gate and continues their venture on foot, and they don't spend long walking in the forest before stumbling on this trail of blood. And freezing the frame at 1 minute and 50 seconds, we can see a face appear when the footage glitches out. The person finds this huge pile of blood and begins to freak out, speaking either another language or the audio might just be super distorted, I can't really tell. The person filming continues following the blood trail until it makes it to this tree where the trail just ends. And then the video just cuts out and we're back to listening to the sermons back in the car. But this time there's something very off about them, because the creepiest thing starts to happen because the preacher's voice gets extremely distorted and he says something completely contradictory to what he was saying earlier.
There is a shadow nested deep, deep within our hearts, within our minds, in a place most people don't even know exists within themselves. The devil is going to call to those depths, dear believer. And though you may tremble before the beast, you should make it easier on yourself and accept what it is that he bestows upon you.
The preacher's voice haunting the person as they drive as fast as they can down this mountain. And the reason that this is so creepy is because at the beginning of the tape, the preacher is saying how the devil will come for those who allow him to, but to fight him at all costs. But now after visiting whatever this tree was, the preacher is now saying the complete opposite. The preacher is saying that you should accept the devil into your life. It's some seriously creepy stuff.
Recommended to brace yourself before touring the thought form chambers, as thought forms can also take on appearances that could be considered disturbing.
This third tape, called Orientation Protocol, which takes on a very common analog horror trope, doing, the orientation stuff, which I think we're all kind of a little burnt out about, but this one is very well done, and it's the only one done in this style, which is cool. In the Orientation Protocol episode, it tells us that this was created by the United States Army, called Project Stargate, created in partnership with Simeo Din USA. And those that are joining the test subjects are going to be joining Unit 13, which is a subdivision of Project Stargate, which is a little confusing, so I did make this graphic. Yeah, this is it. So the US Army is partnered with Simeo Din to create Stargate, and Unit 13 is like down here, I think. Also, apparently there are a lot of rumors about what happens at Unit 13, although in the orientation tape it says that a lot of these are false, if not all of them. And it's then when we're introduced to the real threat of this series called thought forms.
A thought form is the manifestation of a person's will, emotion, or other deeply psychologically energized state into a semi-physical form, existing as not only an extension of the person, but as its own independent and sentient entity.
But the catch is that it has to be a very strong part of you. So for example, a thought form of you could be your anger manifested into a physical form, or the part of you that loves. Just anything that's an extremely strong emotion. They're also kind of like ghosts, not having a physical form but able to interact with humans. The orientation also brings up the theory that because thought forms are created from a high amount of psychological energized state, grief can also come into play, and if several people are grieving, they can unintentionally create a thought form of the person that has just recently died, thus raising the theory that ghosts are not, the energy of the person that's passed, but rather the collective grief creating this thought form. And Unit 13 is trying to figure out how thought forms can benefit the US government, because why not? It's the USA. However, like I said earlier, only people with a higher state of consciousness can create thought forms, and those people would definitely be opposed to using thought forms to benefit the US government. So instead, they created a machine capable of creating artificial thought forms called the Thought Form Manifester. The thought forms created here come in various forms, such as distorted people, animals, or physical manifestations of emotions. However, they can also take on forms that are truly disturbing. And although thought forms can physically touch you in the real world, they are not considered dangerous in any way, or at least according to this orientation tape. And after the thought form is created, it will be put into a container that it will not be able to escape. Which already seems like a bad idea, creating, artificial life and then sticking it in a box. That just seems like a terrible idea. There are also some side effects to this experiment, such as increased tiredness, loss of balance, dizziness, insomnia, vomiting, and episodes of temporary amnesia and mild hallucinations. But the orientation says that these will go away after 72 hours. So I guess we'll see as we go further into these tapes whether or not everything said in this orientation is even slightly true. Spoiler though, I'm pretty sure you can tell that these are going to be dangerous. Alright, so this tape really acts as like the lore for everything we need to know going forward. So the rest of these tapes are shown what went down at Unit 13, so prepare to be freaked out. In tape number 4, called Unexpected Visitors, this one starts out, and this genuinely freaked me out because at first I didn't see the figure in the window, but as it zooms in you realize it's been there the entire time. The person in the window looks really distorted and has this uncanny valley face as well. There's a lot of downtime in this tape, building suspense, and the person filming seems to be breaking into the home that the thought form was in. They make it inside and make their way up to the second floor of the house, and as soon as they do, we can hear screaming and banging like someone is being attacked, but the camera doesn't pick up any of this footage. The camera resumes and the person leaves the home. The tape is then interrupted by this emergency broadcast signal that tells us that in Massachusetts there are 49 or have been 49 home invasions from a group of unidentified individuals.
49 residences since approximately 11:15 p.m. last night. The attacks appear to be random, spanning across the towns of North Adams, Cheshire, Savoy, and Windsor.
The attacks were random and started at 11 p.m. last night. A shelter in place has also been enforced for the safety of the public. The video ends with someone who was watching this broadcast looking outside their window, and there are screams coming from within the woods, and then a hand grabs the window. There's also this collection of images that plays at the end of this video, but they're ones that I can't show because they're pretty messed up, and but it does show a person with their face covered in their own blood, it seems like. So my biggest running theory right now is that the thought forms that were created by Unit 13 have finally escaped their prison and are now wreaking havoc on anything in their path. Or there's also a reason that they might be violent is because they were artificially created rather than spiritually like they are supposed to be, and after being stuck in a cage for so long, they lost it.
He's definitely a growing boy, that's for sure. And you're both looking really good.
Tape number 5, Not Here, Not Now, Not Anymore. This one starts off very differently than the previous tapes. This time we're introduced to a patient and an ultrasound technician. The patient is pregnant and came in for an ultrasound. She and her high school sweetheart landed on calling their child Max. But something goes wrong and the screen completely glitches out and the baby is just gone.
Let's get some measurements to see exactly how much he's grown.
What was that?
I don't know. I've never seen that before. Maybe something to do with the power.
And honestly, I would recommend you guys go watch this one because the performance of the voice actors in this one is extremely well done. After this, they establish that the baby is gone, vanished into thin air, and the final shot is of the patient, Tiffany Crisaldi, 29, school teacher. So at this point it's pretty unclear what's even going on. There are what we believe to be thought forms breaking into people's homes, babies now just disappearing into thin air, and this tree that distorted the voice of the preacher in the second tape. But the only thing we can do is dive deeper into these videos. Tape number 6, Sleeping Dogs. In Sleeping Dogs, we're given a speech from Dr. Bernard T. Haynes, a symposium on Jungian psychology and manifestation of consciousness. And Jungian psychology, which I'm sure the majority of you don't know, I had no clue what that was, is an analytical approach to talk therapy that seeks to bring balance and union between the conscious and unconscious parts of the mind. This speech is taking place in 1981 New York City. Within his speech, he talks about mankind's pursuit to find God, and that when the day finally comes where we do find God, we won't be looking at it like a god anymore, but rather as an equal, which that honestly gives me chills. Yeah. What follows is archival footage of a construction crew that worked on an unknown facility. One of the construction workers, named Paul Morelli, calls to tell the project director, Frank Porter, that there's something odd about the tunnels that they're working in. Frank talks about how there are ancient structures inside of the tunnel with carvings on the wall.
People have been here before. Some obviously man-made shit in there, like carvings and stone. This shit looks ancient, like real old.
But the project supervisor doesn't really care about the carvings on the walls and is just like, keep going, it doesn't matter. So as time goes on, and so does construction, a number of the crew members start to get sick, and that there have even been sightings of some strange figure running in the woods.
Seeing something running around in the woods surrounding the site. I figured it's probably a deer or whatever, but seeing all the ruckus we're making out here, But they all insisted it was something else. Something like a real tall man.
And these messages only continue to get even worse, because Paul mentions someone named Arnold Rivers, who used to be an archaeologist and is now working with the construction crew. And he notes that there is something wrong with these carvings that they found in these tunnels. But again, nobody really bats an eye and they keep going with construction. But later that night, Paul catches a glimpse of that creature in the woods.
I saw that thing the guys have been talking about last night, stalking around in the tree line. I swear it had a face. Anyways, just call me back as soon as you can, Frank.
What's more is that since the construction crew was going to spend a couple of days at this site, they brought a lot of food with them, but by the second and third day, all of the food had seemingly spoiled and just completely rotted, even though they were in containers filled with ice.
All our food is rotten, totally spoiled and covered in maggots. It was perfectly fine and stored. There wasn't any problems with the generator, even if we lost power. I mean, it's the end of March. All our food looks like it's been left out in the heat for weeks.
And it's clear now that something is very, very wrong, because the entire crew now is sick and Paul is losing his mind. And I'm going to play this last bit in its entirety because it's just genuinely terrifying to hear.
I feel like something really bad's gonna happen if I don't go down, so I'm going down tonight.
Tape number 7, back to normal. A broadcast starts and we're given further details on the break-ins.
2 weeks ago, when the emergency broadcast system was engaged to warn residents to secure their homes due to the activity of a group of individuals who had been targeting and breaking into people's homes.
Saying that those behind the attacks were part of an organized criminal effort that was linked to an anti-American militia group operating in western Massachusetts, even saying that things are going to be going back to normal very soon.
To normal for residents of Berkshire County.
The final installment of the series is called Old Odd Ends. Within it we have 3 people, Alan, Samantha, and Liam, 2 producers and 1 GBS executive. A little play on CBS. All 3 work on the show Dom Wright tonight. But Dom Wright, the host, is missing and all of these people are starting to freak out because they can't produce the show without him.
Well, we've been trying to reach him. We've called him multiple times. We've tried his pager. We've asked around to see if anyone's heard from him, but nothing.
We're then shown archives of Arnold Rivers and the archaeologist that was with Paul and the rest of the construction crew. But strangest of all is that they found artifacts from all over the world, and Arnold finally puts together that all of these items were placed here as offerings.
Something people of countless cultures over the history of our planet have been worshipping, but I don't know why. But I can feel it. Whatever's down there, I could feel it. It was like being trapped in a fever dream.
The tape cuts out again, and we find out why Dom Wright didn't come into work that day. Dom Wright was one of the victims of the home invasions. Arnold continues, and that there were carvings that depicted human sacrifice, symbols that even to him, an experienced archaeologist, were unrecognizable. But when Arnold was down there, he heard a voice that compelled him to stay, and now it's all he can hear. So much so that Arnold insisted that they stop construction on the site, but Frank, the supervisor, continues to ignore his reasoning, and instead they offer Arnold a raise, but Arnold doesn't want to risk his sanity and decides to quit altogether.
I refuse again. I won't put a price on my sanity or my health, especially after seeing what was happening to the crew.
And what we see next is what happened to the rest of the construction crew, each of them suffering from insanity, and some of them can hardly even speak. A lot of them are also extremely violent, and one of the workers was driven so mad that they resorted to cannibalism and ate 6 people. Some of them even look like they're deteriorating like a moldy cheese. Arnold says that he knows that all of these tragedies are linked to what happened in the tunnel because they disturbed this ancient site that people have worshipped for thousands of years. And because Arnold knows so much about this, he now believes that he's being followed and suspects that he will be killed pretty soon by potentially the government. The last thing Arnold does is record someone breaking into his home.
Come on out, it's the police.
What's also interesting is that the creature is able to replicate the voices of humans, first impersonating an officer and then a child. Now in this series we have a number of threats at play. We have the thought forms who are created artificially by Simiodin.usa, and the infected who were a part of the construction crew who became ill after working in the tunnel. Arnold even mentions that there were bodies flying from the sky.
The mountain, the home invasions, the dead bodies that fell from the sky over Cheshire.
And on top of that, there is the child who vanished from his mother's womb. And as for any speculation that I have, based on the heavy themes of Christianity, it seems like a rapture is taking place, which according to many Christians is essentially the end times, or the times where humans will be taken back to heaven. Quote, "First he will come for the believers, both living and dead in the rapture. In this view, the rapture, which is the transformation and catching up of all Christians, dead or alive, to meet Christ in the air, will be secret, for it will be unknown to the world of unbelievers at the time of its happening." And although this is probably not the exact case, it seems like something similar is happening. But it can also be the work of a more cynical god-like being, one that was angered that their place of worship was destroyed, and in turn is wreaking havoc upon humans, who before worshipped the god all over the world over thousands of years. They now destroy its sacred place. But yeah, please feel free to let me know your theories and thoughts as to what you think is happening in this series. Do you think you could fight a thought form? I don't know. I think I probably could. Do you think you could? But yeah, huge thank you to my ultimate tiers, Karim Arellano, K-Pop Lover X3, and Knight98. I'll see you later. Bye. Love ya.